The word transgender does not appear anywhere in the Bible, which does not mean that the Bible is anti-trans. The Bible does actually talk about people who don't fit into traditional gender roles, like eunuchs. Eunuchs did not fit within the strict boundaries of how gender was defined in that specific time period. We do actually have examples of how Jesus speaks about eunuchs. It's very highly and with a great deal of respect. There's no verse in the Bible that talks about being trans as a sin.
Well, it's true that the word transgender is not in the Bible. And that's because from the very beginning, God tells us that humans are made in God's image, specifically as male and female. There's no biblical category of transgender because someone's sex is directly a part of how they're made in the image of God. In the ancient world, eunuchs were biological males who had non-functioning, dysfunctional, or castrated genitalia. So Deuteronomy 23:1 forbids men with crushed or severed genitals from serving in the assembly of the Lord. This was a formal gathering of God's people in worship. It didn't necessarily mean they were excluded from the community of Israel. Now, some scholars think this is because that type of mutilation was commonly practiced among male cult prostitutes in the Mesopotamian world. These cult prostitutes were associated with Ishtar, who was identified with Venus, who was masculine and feminine. So basically a goddess that possessed androgynous features. Now, according to scholar Dr. Robert Gagnon, they dressed like women, they acted feminine, they carried a spindle, which was a feminine symbol, and they would dance and even engage in self-mutilation, which was probably castration. Now, whether or not this is why these men were not allowed in the assembly of the Lord, even within the Old Testament itself, we see a picture of the future salvation of Israel. Now, Isaiah 56 specifically mentions foreigners and eunuchs being included. If, and it's a big if, they keep the Sabbath, do what pleases God, and hold fast to the covenant, which would have included the Old Testament prescriptions about sex and marriage. And yes, Jesus did speak positively of eunuchs in Matthew 19. In that context, he was asked a question about divorce. Jesus goes back to Genesis 1:27, reaffirms God's design for sex and marriage. It's in that context that Jesus mentions three types of eunuch: those who were born with a genetic birth defect that would prevent them from having sexual intercourse, those who were castrated, and those who chose to remain single for the sake of the kingdom. So biblically, eunuch does not refer to people who don't fit into traditional gender roles, but rather of biological males who can't, or in the case of Matthew 19, choose not to have sexual intercourse. So to use the idea of eunuch to make a case for transgenderism just isn't biblical. But the great news of the gospel is that anyone, no matter their past, their scars, their sins, they can trust in Christ, be saved and reconciled to God, adopted into God's family, and be given a whole new identity, which is child of God.